Okay, so again, today we're going to cover the typography tool. That's a principal topic of my demonstration. And as I mentioned, I'm not going to follow the lesson step by step as I had with previous lessons, but I want to cover the type tool itself to also explain what each of the aspects of that tool do, and also talk about the terminology used in using typography. So we'll cover this in a little bit. In the meantime, I want to talk about our next assignment after the mask assignment, which is the Tokidoki assignment, or in this particular case, we're going to do a skateboard deck. If you want to do a t-shirt or something like that, that would be okay too. But I prefer that you do the skateboard deck. So I presume everybody can see this okay? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I want to first look at a few examples. Hold on here. I'm going to pause for a second. Recording. Okay, so I was having a problem with Safari browser taking up too much space on my screen. So anyway, the Tokidoki assignment, and where that term comes from is the name of a fellow by the Simone Legno, who's an Italian illustrator designer. And his product that the line that he makes is called Tokidoki. He's Italian. He lives in the States, but the artwork that he does looks very much like Japanese anime illustration. The type of illustration that he does is put on all kinds of products. He works primarily in Illustrator, and skateboard decks is one of the things that his designs go on. They also go on cosmetic packaging, they go on t-shirts, goes on jewelry. They also make 3D modeling of them, little images of them, all sorts of things. So since we're learning typography now and how to use the type tool, I thought it'd be useful to do a skateboard deck, since there are designer skateboard decks too. So what I want you to do is to pick a type of skateboard, or you can use 3 different styles of skateboards and design 3 of them. As you can see in this one by Jenny Ham, that she chose a theme or a design where it's 3 skateboard decks, but they're all integrated together, that I found really beautiful and a really exquisite design. If you want them to be totally separate, you can do that too. And here's another one by Richard Mallory, where they're themed similarly, but they're clearly not identical and they're just separate. You can create them all on one artboard, or they can be on 3 separate artboards if you wish, but I want them to all be on the same file. And here's another one. Again, it's 3 separate designs, but all on the same artboard. Okay, and in this assignment, you have to use typography somehow. Okay, those are just the 3 examples that I had. Where do you get the designs? One of the places that you can go is that if you just simply do a Google search and you put up skateboard templates. So that's what I did. I put in skateboard templates. You get this, and then you go ahead and you make sure the top here, you select images, and you can scroll through them. There's a bunch of them. You know, I mean, this is your typical skateboard template. That's kind of that tongue depressor design. And then you can go ahead and then right click on this. The desired one would probably be this one here with a transparent background. But if you want other designs as well, you know, other skateboard designs, you can choose that. And you simply right click it, download it, and then use it as a background image as a template that will not be printed, but that you will use as a guide, as a framework to build your illustration. It can be themed whatever you want. The sky is the limit. They can be a combination of abstract, they can be representational, the design can be based on existing imagery that may be taken from the popular culture that you want to incorporate into your design. It's really, in many respects, an open-ended assignment. In fact, this one down here, that's an interesting template. And this one as well. That, you know, it can be figurative, it can be abstract. As I said, it's really open-ended. You know, these are good examples of abstract designs, but you do have to integrate typography with it somehow. Okay, does that help you guys, or do you have a question about it?
Does the typography have to be on the board, or can we use it as like a naming device?
If it's not on the board, I would like to see it integrated with the board, but if it's not, then this would be a good example. Notice how this skateboard is named down here at the bottom, you know, slide burn. And each of these skateboards have titles. Now, he did integrate some type within the design of these itself, but no, you don't have to. It has to be. But you have to incorporate typography somehow. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. So I think there are 3 good examples on there. And obviously there's a bunch of them that you can find elsewhere. Okay. So that will be due, again, the end of next week. This is the end of our 3rd week. We're almost the end of our 3rd week. And next week will be the end of the 4th week, and then we'll have 2 more weeks, and we'll have a final project that we'll be working on. Okay. So this is the, let me move on to typography now. And I will go ahead and expand this and make it fit. And everybody can see this, I hope.
Yes.
Okay. So again, this is a typical one sheet, an ad that they've created for us. And there's a lot that the illustrations they've already done. We don't have to do any of that. And the same with the background. We're just going to be integrating some typography with it. So I don't know how many of you have had a type class or any experience with typography, but Illustrator, like the color that we used in the last lesson, has probably one of the most comprehensive type tools that I've ever seen in a program. It is excellent for graphic designers and designing logos and one sheets and that sort of thing, where typography is really an important and essential part of the design. So what I've done is I've just, not that one, sorry, that's for later on. I wanted to go ahead and just start with a blank sheet of paper. And I'm going to move this over a little bit here. And what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and under Window, I want to bring up under Type, I'm going to go ahead and bring up Character. That's probably the most important one that I want here. And then the little flyout window, I want to make sure that I say Show Options so I can see all of the options. So we have this one, we have paragraph styles, we have open type. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. I hope it didn't crash. No. I'm going to pause again. Yeah, yeah, I thought Illustrator was going to crash there for a minute. So to use the typography, you need to use the type tool, which is over here. That's the one with a T, and you'll notice a little tick mark, and there's a bunch of options available for us down here as well. You can have type fill an area. You can have type follow a path. If the type needs to be integrated vertically, you can do that. Or vertical along a path. And then there's the type tool, which is new. So I'm going to start with the type tool. And if you want to begin adding type, you just click anywhere on your board. And you'll notice that your artboard, and you'll notice that when you zoom in, that there has been some Greeking that has been added. Okay, so lorem ipsum. Now what we can do is I can just say, some type. I'm going to go ahead and click on here, highlight it. I see the cursor, and I'll just say some type. And if we look at the top in our options menu, or if we look in our character panel, you'll see that we have a couple of things going on here. That right here in the type tool, in the character panel, that by default Myriad Pro is the typeface that is selected. If I click here, you'll see all of the other fonts that are available to me. Okay. So let's, for example, I'm going to select Arial Black. It's a nice big heavy typeface. And then when I select the type here, it should come up here. So I'm going to go back up here. And why isn't it showing up here? It's not. I don't know why. It should be showing up here as well, type, but it's not. So there's the font that we've chosen. We've chosen in this particular case regular. And if there were other options available for it, it would be here as well, but it's not. So the next thing is that we want to pick the size. If we want to, by default, 12 point has been selected. And that's another important aspect to typography is how it's measured. Type is measured in points and picas. There are 12 points to a pica, and there are 6 picas to an inch. If you do the math, then that means that there's 72 points to an inch. 6 times 12 is 72. So it gives you a ballpark idea of the size of type. The width of type is usually measured in the columns of type is measured in picas. Okay, so that's what we have here. We have the size of the type. And if I want to change it, there are some default sizes. So as big as 72 point, I can go there. And if I go back to my move tool, I can just simply come back here and reselect it, come back with a type tool. Type is, can be edited forever. So I'm going to shrink it down a little bit and go down to maybe 48 point here. So we can see the whole thing and move it over. So this is the font, the typeface, and for whatever typefaces you have available, again, they are found here. Okay. So I'll go back again, and let's pick something a little bit different. I'm going to select Cooper Black. Why not? So again, the type size remains the same, but I did change the font on the fly. The next thing that I want to cover is the tool to the right, which is called leading. Leading is the space between lines of type. So if I select the end of and place the cursor at the end of some type, and I continue to type, it will just make one long string of text. It won't be until I put the cursor between two letter forms and I hit the return key that it will go to another line. So now I'll go ahead and I'll type more type here. And you can see there's quite a bit of space between those lines. Well, that's what this tool covers. Okay, this is the leading. That's what it's called in typography to determine the space between lines of type. And I'll go ahead and I'll highlight both lines. And you can see that it says that it's 57.6 points. If I go back to the auto setting, that will be the same. Now, if I want this to be set closer together, then I can either select a specific point size here, and you can see that you can actually have negative leading where they overlap, or I can jump, if there is technically no leading, I can go to 48, since that would be 48 on 48. But if I want it set really tight, it'd be, I could select 36 points. So that's what this tool does. It controls the space between the lines of type, which, as I said, is called leading. Okay, I'll go back and I'm going to select default again, or auto. And you can see with large type, there is large size type that oftentimes there's way more space between lines than is necessary. When you're setting type for text for body copy, then oftentimes the default leading is useful. It will be adequate amount of space between the lines so that it reads well. But for headlines, oftentimes the default leading is a little bit too much space. That if I had two lines of type for my headline, I would want them to be more integrated into a single unit than to read as separate lines. So that's what that does. The next tool over here is the kerning tool right here. And this controls the space between individual letter forms and words. So for example, if I wanted less space between the T and the E, then I could use this. Right now, it's set to the default of 0. So that's the auto setting. And if I want less space, I could jump all the way to a -100 or more. And notice how it's just the words that are the space between the E and the T that are closer together. And again, if I just put the cursor between them, those words, I can change that. Likewise, I can go ahead and I can say, how about here? I'll go ahead and I'll say, if I want an A and maybe a Z. Okay. Okay. So that's hardly any space at all. But what if I wanted to put less space? Let me put an O in here. There you go. Maybe if I wanted to really tuck that O underneath the Z or right next to the A, let's go ahead and tuck it underneath the Z. That maybe I would want to use some negative leading. So I'll go to -25 and I'll go, just do it in bulk increments until I get a look that's working for me. And if I want it to almost kiss fit or touch, then I can do that. So that's what this tool, the kerning tool, does. Okay. So it allows you to selectively adjust the space between individual letter forms and or words. Now, if I want to, let's say, for example, I have the second line, more type. I'm going to come back up here. What if I wanted more type to have the same length of the length of this line to be the same as the first line? Then I would use the tracking tool right here. So I can click here make sure that I select the whole line. And now I'm going to go ahead and I can either put in individual numbers or I can jump. And you can see that as it gets close to 50. And what it's doing is just stretching out the space between the letter forms and the words uniformly until I get a space that I'm comfortable with that matches the line above. It doesn't alter the height of the type. It doesn't alter the weight of the type or anything. It just uniformly alters the space between the letter forms and the words. Okay, so this is tracking. That's what that does. Okay, so the next one down. This one, the next couple of ones here, the vertical scale tool and the horizontal scale tool, you need to be very careful with those because they actually kind of distort the type. But for example, let's go ahead and let's take the tracking off of that and go back to 0. And let's say, for example, I wanted to create a typeface that looked a little bit, that I could only use this width here. I'll just use the top line here. That I had a specific width that I could use and I couldn't go any wider than that, but I needed to increase the height of the type. Well, that's what I could do here. So it does distort it. And you can see how it begins to distort. So I have not changed the width of the type. I have not changed the spacing, but I have changed the height of it. So in doing so, it actually begins to distort it. Likewise, if you reduce the height of it, it begins to look a little bit more like it. I mean, it also reduces it. What am I saying? It also distorts it equally. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to change that to 200. Okay. Likewise, if I had type here and I wanted to look extended rather than condensed, that's sort of what I've done at the top here. I've created a faux condensed typeface. Then I would use this one here. So it's not going to change the width of it as the tracking did, but it will. Let me go ahead here. It is changing the width. My mistake. Oh, wrong tool. That's not what I want to do. Let's leave it at 100%. It's this one. Yeah, will not change the width. There we go. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not going to change. My mistake. Never mind. It's not changing the height now. It's changing the width. So if you're not careful, notice how it makes it an extended typeface. Okay. So again, I could make it the same width as the one below or the one above, but it makes it more of a, it's not quite 110%, it'd be like about 105%. Actually even more than that. So I'm going to do it incrementally like so. There you go. So it doesn't change the space between the letter forms or the words, but it does extend the width of it. But notice how the type itself has been distorted, especially if I highlight it and I turn it back and I go from 108 to 100%. So in each instance, you can create a condensed or extended form of the letter forms. But in fact, what you're doing is you're distorting the type. That's sort of a type designer's nightmare. Okay, so that's what these do. This alters the height, but it doesn't alter the width. This one alters the width, but it does not alter the height. The next thing to notice is that when you select type, You'll notice that there's a little blue line that when I select the type here, there's a little blue line that underlines the type itself. That's called the baseline. And by default, the type rests on that baseline. Any cursive forms to optically look like they're sitting on that line will rest a little bit below it. But any typeface, let's go ahead and change the typeface here. That has something that's a little bit more regular. I'm going to go ahead and change that, and you'll see what I mean. Go back again. Change that. Yeah, notice how for example, the bottom of the M rests right on that baseline, but the S, the O, the E sit just a little bit below it, but optically they look like they're sitting on the baseline itself. Anything that sits below the baseline or above the waistline has the same. They are called descenders. That's what this is. And anything that lies above, this is called the waistline right here, would be called an ascender, with the exception of the caps. So a T would be an ascender that extends above. Okay. So the next tool that we have here allows you to select an entire word or individual letters and change their relationship to that baseline. I can go ahead and I can move that above like so. And now when I select, come on, why aren't you doing that? Let me do that again. Let me do it for one. I'm going to go ahead and select 0 for right now. So that sits on the baseline, but let me just select, for example, what if I wanted the Y to rest, sit above the baseline? Then I'll do that. And that would be this tool right here. Well, if I wanted it to be that height there. And now if I go back and I select, you'll notice how this individual letter form, the baseline has been raised above. So it's actually sitting above the baseline. Likewise, if I wanted type to sit below the baseline, I could do that. I could select this one and we could move it below. Come on. There we go. Like so. Then the other feature that we have, so this allows you to move type above or below the baseline if you want a special, for some special reason. If you want to rotate type, then that's what this tool does. It allows you to actually rotate it. So you can do some kind of fun things with it. So you can do that with individual letter forms, or you can do it with the entire word. So for example, if I select that, notice how the whole thing is rotating, but at the same time, leaving it editable. Okay. Well, I'm going to go back and I'm going to change all of these back to none. And I'm going to select this one back to none. I'm going to select this one and go back to none. But set to 0. I'm going to highlight this. And go back. And I'm going to now show you some fun things that you can do with type. So for example, if I have my name here, and if I wanted to have this, instead of just go from left to right, if I wanted it to follow an interesting path, one of the things that I could do with that is that I could go to Effect, and I could use Warp, and it won't let me do it. Why not? Because I have to select the type itself. Let me go back here. Let's change that. And I'm going to go back here and I'm going to go to Effect, and I'm going to select Warp. Let's just select Arc as an example. And this is one of the things that we're doing in this particular lesson. So we can control the horizontal bend like so. Let's go ahead and make sure that we have preview turned on. And to an extreme, or, you know, just a subtle bend in the type. That's one of the things, that's arc. We also have one of the things that we're doing in the lesson here is upper arc. So it leaves the bottom letter forms on the baseline, but it actually arcs the upper letter forms. This can be a very powerful and interesting, you know, tool to use, and at the same time, it leaves all of the type editable. You're distorting it and deforming it, but at the same time, it leaves it editable text. So I can click OK, and I can always go back and I can edit this. I can go back and I can highlight it again. And if I decide, you know what, I didn't want that after all, I'm going to go back to the effects and go back to warp. Whoops, I didn't want that. Let's go back. They've changed this a little bit. Select this again. Go back to warp again. And now it's changed it. Okay, so instead of the other one, I've gone back to this one. So I've gone back to an arc. Now, what you might also notice is that the other day, wait, I have a question here. Is it possible to select two styles on the type? Oh, yes. Let me go ahead and answer here. Yeah, you can have multiple styles. You just have to select the type that you want to change. So for example, if I wanted to, I could select, here's the K, and I can come back and I can, you could, actually every letter form could be a different letter form, a different font. So let's say I wanted the K and the M to be a different letter form or a different font, and I could do that. See what I've done here? So that's quite possible. You can add color to the type. You can add effects to the type, other effects. To get a handle on what you're doing to the type, one of the things that I like having available all the time is the appearance panel. I talked about that the other day. So that when I select the type or the object, it tells me what's been added. You can see that warp has been added to it, you know, upper arc. It tells me for the characters, it tells me the type. It gives me a lot of information about it. So I can go ahead and I can highlight it. You know, let's just highlight these letters. And it will give me some important information here. If I click on the characters, it's actually let's look at the effects here. And it says here, and if I just double click on that effect, it will bring that up, that dialog box back up. So I just have upper arc. And I can switch back, and if I want to use the arc instead, then that's what that does. And you'll see here that it's changed here. Because I have multiple fonts selected within this line of type, it doesn't assign the characters to it. Okay. Anyway, that's what that does. Another thing that you can do is you can apply type to a path. And that's another thing that we'll do to this lesson. Let me go ahead and deselect this. And let me show you a couple of different ways of doing that. So for example, what if I go ahead and I select the ellipse tool, and I'm going to go ahead and make a circle like so, and I want it to be No fill, I mean, it actually will remove, what I'm going to do is going to remove all the attributes of that circle. But now what I can do is I can select the text tool and I can click on here and it's going to automatically fill it. And I don't want it to fill it. What I want to do instead, though, is I want the type to be on a path. So instead of using the area fill, I'm going to select that. And I'll just go ahead and click here. And it selects, and obviously it's way, way too big for that. So I'm going to go back to character. Let's close that. And I'm going to reduce the size of this. Go back to maybe 12. Now I can go ahead and I can type away and I can, So now it's following the path. Now if I select the selection tool, I can use this little guide here to move it about. I don't want that. Let me go back. Let's select this one. There we go. So now if I move it on the inside, notice that the type is on the inside of the circle. If I pull it on the outside, it's now on the outside, but as I move the mouse around, it allows me to rotate the type. So again, it's kind of hard to control. I'm having a hard time controlling it, but I want it to rest at the very top. There we go. So there we have that. Now what I can do is I can make a copy of this. And if I wanted to, if I wanted some at the bottom, but I wanted the bottom to be right reading instead of turned upside down, I could take this and I could make a copy of it. And I could go edit. And I could say paste in front. So now I have a copy of that. And now I can take this one and I can move this one down. I can move it inside like so, but now I need the type to be on the outside of the circle, not on the inside. So as I select the type, I could go ahead and highlight it. No, I didn't want to do that. I'm going to go ahead and select it. There we go. This would be a time where you'd want to change the baseline. So now I want it to be below the baseline, like so. And likewise, maybe if I didn't want the text to be resting on this line itself, but I wanted it to be above, then I could move this above the baseline like so. So you've seen a number of logos or marks where they have type that follows a path. And oftentimes it's the mark is a circle. And this would be how you do. Now, it can also be the case that I could go ahead, let me go ahead and zoom out. And I'll just move this whole thing here. And I'll move this one. Let me undo that so that both of them are selected. There we go. So let's say, for example, I want it to follow a nice kind of curvy, squiggly line. But if I use the pen tool or I use the curvature tool, let's go ahead and use the pen tool. I click like so, and click like so. Have a nice curved line. And I want it to be a nice stroke, and let's turn that off. And I want the type to follow this path. I would use, under the type tool, I would want type on a path again. And now I can click. And we have the type following the path. And what makes this kind of nice is that if I use the direct select tool and I select an anchor point, that if I move that down, notice it's kind of, again, the type will follow the path however I distort it. So that can be a nice, really, really nice feature. It's this sort of thing. The type tool in general, but this in general really revolutionized graphic design, because all of this in 1988, 89 up until that point had to be hand set. And now at the designer's fingertips, he could go through any number of options and changes and variations on his design in just a matter of minutes. It actually kind of gives you more options than you really want sometimes. Sometimes too many options can be a challenge. One of the other things that this can do, these tools down here that I wanted to talk about briefly, and then that will probably be close to being it for today. We'll see. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Come on. I want to just delete it. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and just, again, do some basic type. So it's the type tool. And I'm going to tell you some type. And I'm going to go ahead and make it large, fairly large. Maybe 48 point. And I want to change the font. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use Myriad Pro. Okay. So we have some options down here that are very nice. That if I want all caps, you just simply click on that and it's all caps. So what you had started with were caps and lowercase. But if I want all caps, you just click that. So it avoids having to hold down the caps lock or the shift key to do that. Another option here is small caps. So if I click this one, notice what it does. It took all the lowercase letters and it turned those into small capital letters. This is very useful for headlines sometimes that will add emphasis to the headline, but at the same time you won't lose readability. Oftentimes when you use all caps, if there's too many letters, if there are too many words, if it's a big chunk of type, it will be kind of hard to read. Caps and lowercase usually add to the readability or the legibility of the words. And at the same time, if you use small caps, that can do the same thing as caps and lowercase. So that's what that does. If I had, for example, a numeral after this, and I needed superscript or subscript, that's what this does. And then if I select that, then that's a subscript. If I needed a particular letter or words underlined, then I could use this. If I needed a strike through, then we have this tool here. That's what that does. Okay. And then we have a nice option here that I don't know how many of you would ever use it, but it can come in handy, is that when you're using Spellcheck in here, and yes, it does have a Spellcheck tool available to us, is that, let me move this up, is that it will spell check in different languages. So if right now the default is set to English USA, but what if I were designing a document that was both to be used in Montreal, Quebec, which is French-speaking Canada, as well as English, United States, where we predominantly speak United or American English. Well, again, I'll go ahead and I'll type this and I'll just say, I'm going to type Montreal. Okay. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn that off. And I'm going to turn this off. Now, if I highlighted all of this and I change this from English to, let's go ahead and scroll up here. I got to move this down. I don't want it Russian. I don't speak Russian. I want it to be Canadian French. Well, it doesn't do anything for me here but as soon as I highlight it and I go up to edit and I say that I want to do a spell check, okay. Okay, let's go ahead and start. Some type, I can ignore that for right now, and we'll ignore that. But notice where it says Montreal. It brings up that as an option that it doesn't look right, because it says in French that's not found because it needs an accent grave over the E. So I can go ahead and I'll select change, and I'm done. And there you go. So that's done. So now if I select this again and I go from French Canadian and I go back to American English, move it down again. We want American English, USA English. Again, you don't notice a change. But then if I go back to edit and I go back to spell check, I say check spelling, I'll go ahead and start. Again, I don't care about the sum type, so I'll ignore that. But you'll notice again, Montreal comes up. It sees that as a mistake, that in American English, we don't put the accent. So now I can go ahead and I can select change and done. So as you can see, there are any number of, I don't know how many languages, but there are quite a few that it's capable of doing spell checking. So that's what that tool does. Okay. Now, a couple of other things is that you can have paragraph styles. You can set your paragraphs to flush left, centered, flush right. You can also set them to justified with the last line flush left, justified with the last line centered, and the last line, justified and the last line flush right, or just all of it justified. You can do that. We can set up type and paragraph styles, which I can maybe get to on another day. One of the things that I wanted to cover though, and I think this is one of the strengths of Illustrator, is that if you're gonna set a big chunk of type, then what you probably want to do is that you want to select the type tool. And then if you have a specific area that you need to fill with a text, okay, I want this to be filled with text. Well, it will automatically wrap the text from one line to the next. Now what I can do is I can, I'm going to go to my lessons, and they gave us some text files for us to, a text file for us to use, which is just generic text. So now what I can do is I can select all of that text, and I can copy it, and I can come back in here now, and I can paste. And I can select all, and I can pick a more appropriate type size. So again, I need to go to character, and I don't want it 48 point, it's just way too big. But I can now select maybe 11 point type. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna select auto for the leading. And now you can see that as I change the size of the box, that the type will fit it, and it will automatically wrap from one line to the next. But what you may also notice is that if I have a big chunk of text here that fills way beyond the box size that I've created, I either need to make the type smaller, or that you'll notice in the lower right-hand corner, there's a little red button here. That if I click on that, it tells me that if I click here, that that's where the remainder text will go, and that this is linked to this. So for example, if I wanted to go ahead and I wanted to add space between lines, or if I wanted to insert text, notice how it's affecting the box to the right. Okay, so that's one of the things that can do. The other thing that I find really, really interesting, I'll go ahead and I'll make this another line again, another box. Okay, is that right now it's a single column. Well, what if I wanted it to be multiple columns? Well, now I can go to type and I can go to area type area type options. And with area type options comes up over to the right where it says columns. You'll notice that it says the number of columns is set to 1. Well, I can select the 2 and I can select preview, and you can see that it automatically changes it. And we'll select this one to 2 as well. Select this one and do the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to object. I'm sorry, type. I want area type option. And I'll go ahead and I'll switch from 1 to 2. Let's do preview. And if you decide later, you know what, I really want to try 3 columns, it will automatically set the type in 3 columns for you. And if you decide later, or the client decides, you know what, I don't want it to be in 3 columns, I want it to be set in 2 columns, you can always go back and reset it. And it does it really quite nicely without any muss or fuss. Really, really, really beautiful. You also have the option too of placing objects on top of this and having the type wrap around it. So for example, I'm going to go back to our start file here and I'm going to select the truck. Okay, I'm going to copy it. I'm going to come back here. Oops, nope, not that one, this one. And I'm going to paste the truck on top of the type. And I'm going to shrink it down a bit. If I place it right here, you'll notice it just sits on top of the type. But if I go to object and I go to text wrap, I can go ahead and I can select that. And there's also text wrap options. But now notice that the text, it behaves almost like a magnet, you know, with reverse polling, that it's pushing it away. So now if I go back to object and I select text wrap options, I can have it push away a little bit more. Right now it's selected at 6 point, but if I change it to 12 or 18 point, notice how it's pushing it away. And as I move this about, notice how it's pushing the text away from it. Now, back in the day, and I know this is before you guys were born, all of this would have to be hand set if you wanted to do this. And now it's just automatic. That can be a really, really effective tool in design. Really effective. Okay. Maybe, do we have time or do you guys have to go? I was gonna select type styles. But if you wanted to, you could, you know, create your own type styles so that you don't have to remember the type size that you use, the font, the leading, the whatever. That really is very helpful. So if I go to type, let's go back to window and I go under typography and I say that I want paragraph styles. I want character styles. Let's try that. Let's bring that up. We don't have any at the moment. But if I selected this right here, let's just select this type. That I wanted it set initial caps with small caps. I could go ahead and I could add that as a type style. So now what I could do is I could select this word, Montreal, and I could select this character style. And notice how it automatically resets it with the same font and the small caps. Now, Likewise, I could do the same with this. Select all of this. Notice how it changes the size, it changes the font, it changes everything about it. And you can do that with paragraph styles as well. So there's a lot that you can do that. There's a lot of ways that we can distort the type. There's many, other than the effects that we have up here. But I'm sort of running out of time. But yeah, many more things that we can do with that. So I hope this gives you some idea. But one other thing that I wanted to cover today, besides the type, is that the other day we were working with images with that we used the live trace or the image trace feature. Well, for example, if I had, I'm going to go ahead and use this picture of this landscape, this kind of bucolic or kind of landscape. That if I went ahead here and I went to window, I wanted to show you this just as kind of a fun thing to do. I'm going to go ahead and select the, where is it? Image trace, make sure that that window is here. Go ahead and select that. Maybe it's because this has already been done. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. I'm going to bring in another one just to bring it in again because I was playing with this ahead of time. And I'll go ahead and shrink this down a bit so that it fits in the screen. There we go. So by default, it has 128 colors. You trace an image, and I don't want black and white, I want color. We can select preview. And it might take a minute for it to trace it. And it doesn't work well in every instance, but right now it's using 30 colors is the default setting. You can control, when it does trace it, the quality of the paths that you want, if you want corners to be really sharp, or if you want curves to be rounded. Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch this to maybe just 8 colors. Show you what happens here. So at any time, if you use a photograph, and this is kind of what we were doing the other day, that if we want, I can go ahead. There we go. So that's broken it down to 8 colors. But now what I can do is I can go ahead and I can expand this. And you can see all of the shapes that this has created. It could be a bit overwhelming. But this is where the fun lies, I think, is that if you remember, one of the things that we could do is we could recolor this. So with all of that selected, I could go to edit colors here and I could select a key color. And let me make sure that these are, let's go back here. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that these are linked. And then if I change that like so, notice how I can scroll through here and, just move the key color around and change all of my color patterns here. And you can come up, for those of you who are interested in doing silk screening and that sort of thing, this would be an excellent way to do that sort of thing. To take a photograph and then also go through. And remember, when you do this, you can also assign and you can create different color sets with this, color groups, so that you could go back to it at any time and apply the colors to them. And then you can rearrange the colors any way that you want. So I thought that this is pretty cool. This was very popular a while back. And, simplifying it, going back and editing some of the shapes and removing and simplifying the shapes and coming up with something really pretty interesting. Okay. So that's typography, and that's also a little bit on image trace, and also talking about our next assignment, the Tokidoki assignment. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pause my recording for a moment.